Although millions of people go missing every year, only a tiny fraction of them go viral and capture the public's attention for decades on end. Brian Schaefer, Aisha Degree, and Natalie Holloway are three such examples. But if you're familiar with the subject of missing people, even on a casual basis, there's a high chance that you've also heard the name Maura Murray. She was a promising young woman who accomplished more in her 21 years of life than many do in 80. But despite her past achievements, her life had taken a turn for the worst, leaving her future full of dread and uncertainty. On a cold February night in 2004, her black 1996 Saturn sedan crashed into a snowbank, and she vanished into the night, sparking the beginning of a perplexing missing persons case that continues to baffle police, her family, and random neckbeards on Reddit, even now, over 20 years later. Whatever happened to Maura Murray? Welcome back to episode 37 of Super Mystery Bros. And back with me is Kyle. Kyle, what it is, brother man?
Not much, man. How you been?
I've been good, man. I've been good. So what are we talking about tonight?
Tonight we are discussing the disappearance of Maura Murray.
Who's that, man?
She is, or was, a college student who disappeared back in 2004 with nary a trace. She was driving her car, got a little minor car wreck. The cops were called, and in the 10 minutes it took them to show up, she was no longer in her vehicle. Never found, no trace.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about her, and this one is one that gets talked about online constantly, so I figured that we just throw our hat into the ring as well. So it's pretty much on par with Brian Schaefer when it comes to just rabbit holes and a complete lack of answers. I do want to say that there's an ocean of other podcasts that have covered this one, and there's people out there who are just obsessed with this case. And, you know, it's similar to the people in like the DB Cooper case in that everyone has their own rabbit hole that they dive down, but I always make it a point never to listen to anyone else's opinions or podcasts or YouTube videos about the subject matter that we're going to be talking about, because I don't want anyone else's opinions to, you know, infect my own. So diving down obscure rabbit holes is not something that I plan on doing on this episode. Anyway, before we begin, I do want to note that our main source for tonight's episode is an old article that we dug up on the Internet Archive on WhitmanHansonExpress.com that was written in 2007, so early shout out to them. Kyle, you got anything before we begin?
Yeah, just want to let the listeners know that unlike most of our episodes that we have fun with and we like to goof around and make jokes, this is still an ongoing thing. So we're going to treat this subject with the utmost respect for Maura and her family.
Yeah, we're definitely going to tone it down for this one. So anyway, let's start with the background of her life. Are you ready to get into it?
Ready.
All right, so Maura Murray was born on Star Wars Day, May the 4th, 1982, in Brockton, Massachusetts, which is just northwest of Plymouth, Massachusetts, the site of the Mayflower Landing and the first Thanksgiving. To parents Fred and Laura Murray, the family was Irish Catholic. During her high school years, she was an overachiever, not only academically, but also as a star track athlete. She even set the school record for the 2-mile run by coming in at 11:20, which is hella fast, dude. That's like a 5-minute 40-mile average.
Yeah, I can't even walk a mile that quick, which is how I used to judge my time in high school. I didn't run for that shit.
Yeah, I've never ran that fast. Her brother Fred Jr. said of her, quote, "Maura was talented in everything she did. Be it schoolwork, she got straight A's. Be it athletics, top notch in everything she did." End quote. In 2000, she graduated from Whitman-Hanson Regional High School at the top of her class and was accepted into West Point Military Academy, which is definitely not an easy thing to do. So for context here, you've got to not only have perfect or near perfect grades to get into West Point, but you've got to have a lot of other extracurricular activities on your record. along with a congressman's written recommendation to get accepted. And from what I understand, the actual acceptance rate is only about 10%. So if you're dedicated enough to get through the program, you'll go to college on the government's dime, you'll graduate with your degree, and then you're going to commission as an Army officer. So yeah, it's just incredible. But in Maura's case, she attended West Point for 3 semesters studying chemical engineering. And while there, she met fellow Army cadet Billy Rausch, whom she began dating in the fall of 2001. Life for Maura was looking up until one bad decision cost Maura her entire Army career. During a trip to Fort Knox's commissary, she was caught shoplifting some makeup, which, to those of you who don't know, is a big no-no in the military, especially for someone who is on their way to becoming an officer. However, in Maura's defense, we've all made some piss-poor decisions in our late teens and early 20s, so no shade there. But the decision to steal makeup valued at less than $5 did change the trajectory of her life permanently. Instead of waiting to be formally expelled, she decided to drop out and move back to Massachusetts to attend the University of Massachusetts at Amherst to study nursing like her mother had. Billy would eventually move on to commission as an Army officer, and the two would pursue a long-distance relationship, Billy being stationed in Oklahoma, while Maura was up in Massachusetts working on her degree. All right, so what do you think about all this, man? So, I mean, she graduated in 2000, and then she got accepted into West Point at that time, so that would have been the year before 9/11. It just seems like such a hell of a time to put yourself down that path, you know?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and you know, that also just speaks to her character and her drive and things like her grades, extracurricular activities. You know, it definitely takes a driven, dedicated person to get into West Point. You know, you said, I also read that their acceptance rate is about 10%, and that's even if you check all the boxes to even get that far.
Yep. Yeah, so I was an ROTC cadet in college, which is just way, way easier to get. It's like the community college version of West Point, you know? There's no surprise to me that you would get tossed out that easily for stealing even $5 worth of makeup. Because back in my day, if the cadre found out that you were underage drinking or that you smoked a marijuana cigarette or, God forbid, you got a DUI, you'd get shit canned in an instant. So, yeah, you know, contrary to all the memes and the stereotypes, you know, the military generally wants nothing to do with you if you're not squeaky clean, especially if you're an officer or on your way to becoming one, I mean. But again, though, I'm not trying to throw shade on her for it. It just sounds like some dumb shit that any one of us could have done in a moment of lapsed judgment, you know, as a young person like that.
So that about does it for her general background. Let's get into some of the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. Let's start by reading an excerpt from Maura Murray missinginfo.com. As our listeners will know, this is my absolute favorite part, is reading excerpts.
You do such a good job, though.
I'm glad you think so. It's been heavily rumored that Maura and her boyfriend Billy were having relationship trouble. Long-distance relationships are tough to begin with. When Maura was at UMass, Billy was stationed at an Army base in Oklahoma. While they spent Christmas break together in Billy's home state of Ohio, and post-disappearance, both the Murray and Rausch families made media statements about how wonderful their relationship was. Comments like, quote, "They were engaged to be engaged," end quote. Things have been uncovered that point to trouble in paradise. There was alleged cheating on both sides, and Maura's assistant track coach, known as Hoss, divulged information to James Renner that pretty much confirmed he was dating Maura in the spring and summer of 2003. She cut things off with him to focus on Billy, though Hoss made some concerning remarks that he got the impression Billy was controlling, and Maura felt like she could not get away from him. History seems to have a way of repeating itself, and just as Maura had trouble at West Point, she began having issues at UMass. In November of 2003, 3 months before her disappearance, a young woman living in Maura's dorm noticed unauthorized charges on her credit card from a restaurant local to campus called Pinocchio's. She went to the police, who in turn contacted the restaurant. As fate would have it, a call came in shortly after. The caller, using the same stolen credit card number, placed a delivery order. Police scrambled to set up a sting to figure out who was behind the fraud. When the delivery man buzzed the dorm and requested a signature on the receipt, the police came in. It was Maura they busted. They took a booking photo on the spot. A judge eventually ruled that charges would be dropped if, along with repayment, Maura did not get into any type of trouble for the next 4 months. If she broke any laws, she would be on the hook criminally, which, going by Massachusetts law, would likely be identity theft and credit card fraud. Not good things to have on a criminal record, especially for someone who planned on going into nursing, where background checks are a huge part of the hiring process. Maura's future career essentially depended on her staying out of trouble until February 2004, when the judge would review the case and determine the final outcome. End of excerpt.
A slap on the wrist. All she had to do was stay out of trouble until February 2004 to not be charged criminally. So easy, a caveman could do it. So at this point, it seems like Maura is kind of going down the wrong path, and there's, a certain duality to her personality where on one hand, she's this overachieving academic juggernaut, but then there's like a dark side to her where she has like a compulsion to steal and commit petty crimes. It's not really my intent to throw shade on her here, but I think it's kind of an important thing to note here. Speaking of February 2004, though, let's talk about February of 2004. So the information in this section ahead is going to largely rely on an article that was written on WhitmanHansonExpress.com back in 2007. So here goes. Thursday, February 5th, 2004. Maura was working her job at the security desk at the Melville dorm at Amherst, checking IDs of the students as they entered. She was chatting with her sister Kathleen over the phone, reportedly about guy troubles mostly. By Kathleen's account, the conversation wasn't too unlike any other. However, long after the conversation had ended, and hours later into her shift, she inexplicably broke down into tears and had to be comforted by her supervisor, who eventually walked her home to the Kennedy dormitory. The reason for this emotional breakdown remains a mystery. On Saturday, Maura's dad Fred came to UMass to help Maura shop for a new car. Much like yours truly at her age, she drove a Saturn sedan that was on its last legs. According to Fred, she would have had a new car by the following week. The two would go out to dinner together, along with Maura's friend Kate Markopoulos, and afterward, Fred retired back to his hotel and offered to lend Maura his Toyota Corolla for the night. Maura and Kate would then drive back to UMass in the Corolla, where they went to a small party in a dorm, reportedly drinking sky blue malt mixed with wine. Now, Kyle, what is sky blue malt? Do you know that? Is that like that sky blue vodka, but mixed as like a foo-foo girly kind of drink, like a Smirnoff Ice? Or
I'm not sure. So sky blue is a vodka, and they have a lot of different flavors, kind of like Smirnoff, but I have no idea what sky blue malt is.
It must be like their version of the Smirnoff Ice kind of thing. Zima.
Even still, why would you mix that with wine? Like, that doesn't sound like that'd be good.
That sounds like a vomit storm waiting to happen.
Anything mixed with wine that isn't, I don't know, wine.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on. For reasons unknown, Maura decided that she wanted to return the car back to her father that night, even though he wasn't expecting it back until the next day. Somewhere around 2:30 a.m. that morning, she smashed the car into a guardrail on Route 9 in Hadley and caused approximately $8,000 worth of damage to the car. The police arrived on the scene, but somehow managed to either fool the police officers into thinking she hadn't been drinking, or they just decided to let her off the hook. So, just to clarify here for the purposes of the timeline, she went out to dinner with her dad and her friend Kate on Saturday the 7th of February, and then she crashed her car in the early morning hours of Sunday the 8th. So we're still talking about the same night pretty much. And Kyle,
did she crash her car, or she crashed her dad's new car?
She crashed her dad's car.
Yeah.
And I don't understand this part of the story very well either, because she just decided to randomly return the car that night, but then it's like by driving it back to her dad's hotel, but then how was she going to get home? That doesn't make sense to me.
I think people used to take these things called cabs back in the day.
Even then, why would you? It just doesn't make any sense to me.
No, it doesn't.
Anyway, why don't you move on?
All right. So that might sound weird, but here's where things get really weird. On Monday, February 9th, she began making a series of phone calls, one of which was to the Solomons, I think I said that correctly, a couple who owned a condominium at the Seasons at Attitash Resort
I guess.
Attitash Resort in Bartlett, New Hampshire. I'm going to read a lot of names coming up that I don't know how to pronounce, just a heads up for the listeners. But by the time police questioned them about this phone call, it was a year later and they were unable to remember the phone call. However, they did say that it would have been impossible for her to rent the condo on such short notice. Later that day, she made a call to 1-800-GHOSTO, which was a hotline where hotel bookings could be made. You know, before there was the internet, we had to call hotlines.
Yeah, the internet back in 2004, but it was that transitional period.
Yeah, like Google couldn't do every single thing for us.
Yeah.
However, at the time she placed the call, it was out of order, and she would have been unable to make a hotel reservation. Also, on Monday, February 9th, she emailed her boyfriend Billy with, quote, "I love you more, stud. I got your messages, but honestly, I didn't feel like talking to much of anyone. I promise to call you today, though. I love you, Maura." End quote. Shortly after this email, she called him on his cell phone and left a voicemail that was of similar content.
Just to stop you right here, it just sounds like she's having a hard time, I guess, and it sounds like she wants to get away just based on this information. Like she wants to take a weekend away or something like that to get away from everybody. She doesn't want to talk to anybody, and she's just going to head north for who knows how long, a few days.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
The most bizarre communication from Maura on this day were emails from Maura to her nursing teachers and boss, in which she claimed that there was a death in the family and that she would be out of town for several days. However, this was a lie, as there was no death in Maura's family. Maura subsequently packed up some of her belongings, including some clothes, toiletries, college textbooks, and more.
So sorry to keep stopping you here.
That's okay.
But the fact that she packed her college textbooks, I mean, to me, I don't want to start speculating too much before we get into the end of the story, but it sounds like she planned on still being around. You know, you don't pack your college textbooks if you plan on disappearing forever, you know, and never returning to your college classes again.
Yeah. By 3:30 p.m., Maura hopped in her Saturn and began driving off. She stopped at a nearby ATM and withdrew most of the money in her account, which was $280. She then stopped by a liquor store and bought $40 worth of alcohol, which included Bailey's, Kahlua, vodka, and a box of wine. She then drove off and headed north toward New Hampshire. Nobody knows for certain where she was going, but some believe that it was to her favorite family vacation spot of Attitash Ski Resort in the White Mountains of New Hampshire.
Yeah, put a pin in that, and let's come back to that later, because there's something fucky about that theory.
Okay.
At 4:37 p.m., she checked her voicemail, and this was the last recorded call on her cell phone. Little is known about Maura's route after leaving the liquor store. However, what is known is that at some point after 7 p.m., while driving westbound on Wild Amonusuk Road, aka Route 112, she was involved in a single-car accident, and she ended up stuck on a snowbank just beyond a sharp left curve in the road between Old Peters Road and Bradley Hill Road on the eastbound side of the road. So, Kyle, I want to know, did you actually Google map this area?
I did Google map that. What I didn't do was do the actual street view. Looking for a speed corner warning sign. So I'm not sure how tight the corner really is, but I did look at it on satellite, and it's definitely one of those corners that could just come up on you. It's almost like a 90-degree left.
Well, okay, so this was a little confusing for me, and I just realized that I wrote this kind of misleadingly. So the curve was ahead of her, so she was driving towards the curve, and then she crashed. It wasn't like on the curve or after the curve, I
believe it was after the curve.
No, because she was going westbound on this road, and that means that the curve was in front of her when she crashed.
Well, I believe she was going eastbound on this road because that's where the curve is. And it
Folks,
says,
just bear with us for a moment. We gotta check this.
so where the car crashed, right? Where between Old Peters and Bradley Hill, right? That stretch of the road runs north and south.
Right, but it's generally the road goes west to east, generally. But that particular section is more north-south, right?
Yes.
So when I say she was heading westbound, that's what I mean, just the general direction.
Oh, so you think her general direction was westbound, meaning she would have been heading south on this road. The corner would have been a right for her, but she wiped out.
Correct. That's my understanding. Let me I'm gonna just check real quick.
She wiped out on the eastbound side of the road, which is why I thought it was after the turn, because that would have flung her to the outside of the turn going north on that road.
Right, and that's what I originally believed too, until I read some information that said she was actually traveling westbound on the road and when she wiped out. And this would have been before she made the curve.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but that's
okay,
weird.
So it is weird.
If she was traveling the direction you think she's traveling and the car was found on the east side of this road, the car would have been facing in the opposite direction of traffic for that side.
You know what? I'm going to ask Gemini. What does Gemini say? What direction was Maura Murray traveling on Route 112 when she crashed? Maura Murray was traveling south on Route 112 when she crashed. The car was found facing north, indicating that it had likely spun around after the impact.
Oh, well, that would be why there's no notes on it facing the opposite direction of traffic, because she spun a full 180, crossed the lane, wound up in the ditch on the other side facing the right way.
Correct, yeah.
According to Google's all-knowing AI. Let's just put that out there.
All right, I'm going to say, do you have a source for that information? Unfortunately, I couldn't find a specific source. God damn it, Google. Anyway, the point is she crashed right there. Maybe it doesn't really matter too much in the grand scheme of things. It doesn't,
but while we're on the subject, and I'm looking at the map right now, that stretch of road that runs mostly north and south, right? There is a turn before and a turn after. So either way, she probably came out of a turn and might have been hitting it a little hot and started washing out.
Yeah. All right. So no matter which way she was traveling, no matter which way she was traveling, it might not affect the story in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. No, I think we were just covering it to find out why or how she crashed. And
it didn't make sense to me because it looks like she wiped out after making the turn, which would have made more sense to me. But then I read somewhere some information that actually said she was traveling westbound on Route 112, which made me do a double take. And I was like, well, that means she wiped out right before the turn.
Before the tight turn, but there's still a semi-tight turn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess.
Before that. Plus, she could have not been paying attention. She could have just veered off to the right into the bank a little bit and then overcorrected. Saw a rabbit she didn't want to hit, yanked the wheel. Who knows, right? But what we do know is that she hit a snow bank, which means the roads are cold. There might be snow on the roads.
If you saw the crime, not the crime scene, but this accident scene photos, the road is covered in snow. And
well, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so easy to wreck if you're not careful. Anyway, back to the story. Faith Westman, the owner of what's known as the Weathered Barn, which is a local landmark, saw Maura's black Saturn sedan stuck in the snowbank and decided to call the police. Faith and her husband, Tim Westman, described the driver differently. While Faith described the driver as a man smoking a cigarette, Tim described the driver as a female on a cell phone. Another neighbor, Virginia Murat, saw the scene from her kitchen window. Quote, "From our kitchen window, we saw a car down the road with trouble lights flashing and someone walking around the car," end quote, Virginia told WhitmanHansonExpress.com. Meanwhile, another neighbor arrived home via school bus. It was the driver of the bus, a man by the name of Arthur Atwood, who lived just down the road on 4 Wild Amonusuk Road. I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm sorry, guys. Amonusuk? Does that sound right to you?
Amonusuk.
Road, approximately 100 yards away. Arthur stopped and asked Maura if she would like him to call the police, but she declined and told him that she had already called AAA and pleaded with him not to call the police. Quote, "I saw no blood. She was cold and she was shivering," end quote, Atwood told the Caledonian Record. Atwood offered to let her wait at his house until help arrived, but Maura declined and was adamant about staying with the car. Atwood later stated that at the time he doubted that Maura could have called AAA due to the sparse cell coverage in the area. The conversation only lasted a couple minutes. Before leaving the area, Atwood advised Maura that she should turn her lights on to avoid getting struck by an oncoming vehicle. As it turns out, Atwood's assumption was correct. No call to AAA was ever placed. So, Kyle, how would you describe this area?
Well, it's very rural, right? But it's mountainous rural. Not that there's mountains jutting up everywhere, but the whole thing is surrounded by trees. Like if there's not a building and a yard, it's dense with trees. You're in the woods.
Basically a very, very rural area, rural neighborhood in this area. Tons of trees, tons of woods. Neighbors are spread apart pretty far. Like maybe, I don't know, how far apart do you think these houses are? In this particular area, there's like a small cluster of about 2 or 3 neighbors, but then you get back, you spread out from there, and houses are pretty far apart from each other.
Yeah.
And they're all separated by dense woods.
Yeah, and even in this cluster, like if you want to call it, there's still like 100 to 200 yards between neighbors,
Yeah.
Like you've got some space, But also, in really tiny rural neighborhoods like this, there's there's only a handful of residents. Everyone knows each other. Everyone knows what they drive, and people in tighter knit communities are usually out to help people. So they see his car wrecked. It's not surprising that literally any neighbor that sees this wants to offer help.
Yeah. Another kind of interesting thing to note here is that this area was actually pretty close to where Betty and Barney Hill allegedly got abducted by aliens. So
really,
about 20 miles, I think, something like that, from what I understand. So fairly close, same general vicinity.
Huh.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we're ready to move on, unless you got anything else.
Nope. By 7:46 p.m., just 16 minutes after Faith Westman's phone call to 911, and approximately 7 to 9 minutes after Arthur Atwood drove away from the scene, Police Sergeant Cecil Smith arrived at the wrecked car, but the driver, Maura Murray, was nowhere to be found. The driver's side window was cracked, and both airbags were deployed.
So let's just put a thumbtack in that real quick, because that means that she disappeared within the span of those 7 to 9 minutes. So Arthur Atwood finishes talking to her, drives home, and then 7 to 9 minutes later is when the police show up and she's nowhere to be found. So
yes,
very, very tight window there.
Very small. Sergeant Smith found the car to be locked. There was a box of Franzia red wine behind the driver's seat, along with red liquid splattered on the ceiling and the driver's side door. Later, he would also find a Coke bottle filled with wine. Yes. Undercover, drinking and driving.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's one thing to drive home after you're drunk, but drinking while you're driving is like a whole other level,
Yeah. Speaking with the neighbors, nobody could tell Sergeant Smith where the driver had gone, so he drove around looking for about 15 minutes, but to no avail. Within an hour of Sergeant Cecil's arrival, the EMS and fire crew had left the scene. Maura's car was towed away, and Sergeant Smith responded to another call. The temperature dipped just below freezing that night, and a bolo was put out the following afternoon for Maura Murray. In case you don't know, bolo is an acronym for Be on the Lookout. It wasn't until around 5 p.m. the following day, Tuesday, that Maura's father, Fred, learned that his daughter was missing, and by the early hours of Wednesday morning, he was at the Haverhill, New Hampshire Police Department, and then headed to the scene to search for signs of his daughter.
Meanwhile, Maura's boyfriend, Second Lieutenant Billy Roush, requested a leave of absence from his duties and was on his way to Dallas-Fort Worth Airport to catch a flight north to aid in the search. Within just a couple of days, the entire family had converged on the area and began searching high and low for Maura, posting flyers and asking local businesses if they had seen her. A search dog was able to track Maura's scent to the intersection of Bradley Hill Road, which is just about 100 yards east of the scene of the accident, and near to where Arthur Atwood lived. However, the dog was unable to pick up her scent at any of the nearby homes or woods. So, basically the dog lost her scent in the middle of the intersection, and some people believe that this indicates that she might have gotten into a vehicle right there. During the investigation, the police seized her computer and determined that Maura had downloaded directions to Burlington, Vermont, and her cell phone was unable to be pinged due to either poor cell coverage or a dead battery. So, here's what confuses the hell out of me. It was said in this article that we used for our main source that she was likely heading toward Attitash Ski Resort, which was, her family's favorite vacation spot. But that's nowhere near Burlington, Vermont. It's a long ways to the west, the opposite direction from Burlington. So, one, I don't understand why she was driving to Burlington. And then two, why would she be driving to Burlington if her destination was going to be the Attitash Resort? To me, it doesn't make any sense. I mean...
Well, that was only people's best guess, is that was her destination. No one knows for sure. She didn't tell anyone or leave any definitive evidence of this is where I'm headed.
Right, but I mean, some people speculate that she was going to the Attitash Resort. Yeah. But we know that she printed out directions to Burlington, and that route that she was on would have taken her to Burlington. So it's to me, it's way more likely that she was on her way to Burlington, Vermont. But the thing is, nobody really knows why she was going to Burlington. It's such a random place to go to.
Is it? I don't know what's in Burlington. I don't know much about the
knows.
Upper East.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
That's a mystery for another day.
All right. Next episode, the mystery of what lies in Burlington, Vermont.
What the fuck is in Burlington, Vermont?
The following comes directly from our main source, an article written on WhitmanHansonExpress.com. There are several homes in that area of the road, which is just yards from the Bath town line. On the even side of Wild Amunusuk Road is the home of Arthur Butch Atwood, the bus driver who said he stopped and offered Maura help that Monday evening. Across the street at 1 Wild Amunusuk Road is the home of Rick Fossier, a 45-year-old local contractor who was living in a trailer on his property while his home was being built. Also within view is the property of Virginia and John Marotte, who live adjacent to Rick Fossier. The abrupt loss of Maura's scent in the middle of the road prompted officials to speculate that Maura got into a passing vehicle. Whether she did so voluntarily or was forced remains open to question. As the day drew to a close, police spoke with the Murray and Roush families. Billy Roush had arrived in Woodsville earlier Wednesday and met up with his parents, Bill and Sharon, who traveled from their home in Marengo, Ohio. Around 5 p.m. Wednesday, the Roush family arrived at the Haverhill Police Department, located on Route 10, about 9 miles from the scene of Maura's accident. Quote, Billy was extensively interrogated in private, and then Bill and I were questioned in the room with Billy, end quote, Sharon Roush later recounted. Fred Murray was asked if his daughter had recently experienced any traumatic events. He could only think back to Amherst when Maura banged up his new car. But in Fred's words, quote, it wasn't a big deal, end quote. At a meeting that night, Haverhill police speculated that Maura was suicidal or had planned to run away. There was no evidence of foul play or that Maura had wandered into the woods. Haverhill Police Chief Jeff Williams said. He also explained that Maura, at age of 21, was within her legal rights to not want to be found. Sharon Rausch did not share that opinion. Quote, "I cannot believe," she said, "that there would be any problem in her life that would cause her to run away from 3 close groups of people in her life. Her family, Billy and his family, and the very close-knit of group of Hanson High School girlfriends," end quote. By the next day, Thursday, February 12th, police had issued a press release stating Maura may be en route to Cancamungus Highway area and was, quote, listed as endangered and possibly suicidal, end quote. The press release also stated that, quote, "Witnesses at the scene reported seeing a lone female with no apparent injuries who appeared impaired due to alcohol consumption," end quote. It still remains unclear who the witnesses were that said Maura appeared to be intoxicated. The release was not dated, but a timestamp shows it was faxed to the Hanson, Massachusetts Police Department at 3:05 p.m. Thursday. End of excerpt.
Yeah, all right. So there are a couple details in this passage that I wanted to go over with you. So, Fred Murray, when he was asked if his daughter had recently experienced any traumatic events, he could only think back to Amherst when Maura banged up his new car. But in Fred's words, quote, "It wasn't a big deal," end quote. Do you think that he's kind of downplaying it? Because wrecking someone's car, causing $8,000 worth of damage to it, even if that's covered by insurance, I mean, that sounds like kind of a big deal still. Especially when you were really, really close to getting a DUI from it as well. Like that, that is a big deal. I don't,
But now, in the grand scheme of things, this man's daughter is missing.
Correct.
Nothing is a big deal compared to my daughter is missing.
Correct.
I believe that's why he said that. If she was fine, I'm sure he was livid because he took her car shopping. He was going to buy her a car because her Saturn was on its last legs, right? And then he's like, "Hey, since your car's a giant heap, you can take my brand new Corolla," and then she gets allegedly drunk and crashes it.
But he says it wasn't a big deal. But I mean, I'm talking about at the time. I just wonder what the reaction would have been. I wonder if this incident where she crashed his car, what if he did get really pissed off at her, and that sort of was the last straw for her, and she wanted to get away from everybody, and that was the prelude to her wanting to go on this excursion or whatever the hell she was going to do,
I see. That's how you're reading into it.
Right.
I gotcha. Yeah.
But I mean, in the grand scheme of things, of course it wasn't a big deal, not compared to her disappearance, of course.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm saying. But I mean, at the time that this happened, I just wonder if his reaction to it was a lot harsher than he's letting on. You know what I mean?
It most likely was.
Yeah. I would be pissed too if my daughter wrecked my car like that.
Yeah.
But I don't think I believe he just let it go and was like, "It's all right, honey."
Yeah. No, I mean, I get how you're reading into it that way,
Yeah.
But the way I read into it as he's saying this for the quote, at the time he says this, his daughter is missing. So basically he's brushing that under the rug like, "Hey, that wasn't a big deal. This is the big deal right now."
Correct.
But no, I do get what you're saying, and that does make a lot of sense. That could definitely come into play. That could be part of the equation why she is trying to get away for the weekend, for the week. Who knows?
Yeah, and then the other thing I wanted to kind of talk about was, so the police, they speculated that Maura was suicidal or had planned to run away. Now, this was just at the time, but as I said earlier, I don't think if she was planning to kill herself or she had planned to run away, that she would bring her college textbooks. That makes no fucking sense to me. Why would she pack her college textbooks if she never planned on returning?
Another bit of evidence I have to support you and not the suicidal thing. Something that wasn't in this, but I did read elsewhere, is when she withdrew money from her ATM, she withdrew most of it, which it did say here, but she left like $16, right? Like she withdrew 280 and left 16 in there. She didn't completely clear out her account to keep it open.
Well,
you know?
to be fair, I don't think you can withdraw $16 from an ATM. I think isn't the minimum 20?
You know what? That's a valid point.
So I mean, I'm sure if she had the round number of 300 in her account, she probably would have she would have withdrew the 300.
That's a fair point. Okay. Yeah. I thought she like left a little bit in there to keep the account open, but no, that does make sense. That you can't withdraw the last $16 and change because it only spits out 20s.
Yeah. All right, so let's move on. Let's talk about the aftermath and some possible theories here. So Rick Forcier, a 45-year-old contractor who we just talked about, who lived across the street from Arthur Atwood, the school bus driver, reported that he saw Maura on the night of the incident, just 4 to 5 miles from the scene of the accident while he was returning home. According to Forcier, he observed a woman matching Maura's description running eastbound on Route 112. So, real quick, just to pause. So she's running eastbound on Route 112. That would have meant she was running back the way that she drove from, which to me, I think would make more sense because she had just come from that area. And I think she would feel more comfortable retracing her steps rather than running into the unknown, if you know what I mean.
The unknown. Yes. I agree.
Yeah. So going back to the script here, at first he didn't mention it to the police because he wasn't sure about the date he saw the woman. But after checking his work records, he determined that it must have been the same night. After the police interviewed Forcier and verified his work records, they found his story to be credible. On May 8th, the police took canines out to search the area where he reported to have seen Maura, but found nothing. So, here's my question. Sunset was about 5:15 p.m. that day, so this incident was well after sunset, right? So she's running eastbound, he's driving westbound. The speed limit is about 30 to 35 miles per hour from what I saw on signs posted on Google Street View. So depending on the exact spot in the road, I would just question like how reliable his account is, because for one, he wasn't looking for a missing person, so he would have had no reason to specifically remember that, right? And then two, it was a fleeting moment at night, and I'm not sure how he'd be able to know for sure if it was Maura that he saw, especially since it was about a week later that he came back with this story. So I'm not saying that it's impossible, but I'm just saying I don't know if I trust his account. He might be mistaken.
So, you know, he doesn't say it's her. It says he observed a woman matching her description. But I do agree, it's a week later. It's dark. You know, he's traveling at speed. But also, like I said earlier, these communities, they're much tighter, much smaller knit. If you're not used to seeing someone running at a certain time of day or night, you're probably gonna take a second look.
That is true.
You know? Yeah.
Less likely to have a stranger be running in that area, huh?
Yeah, especially running down the road at night. So something tells me that's not common to see
around
in
freezing
this area.
Temperatures.
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah, I can see that. All right, I'll give it a little bit more weight than I otherwise would have. Back to the story here. Later in 2004, a man named Larry Moulton came forward and gave Fred Murray, Maura Murray's dad, a bloody knife, alleging that this knife was found in his brother's car. A man with a violent temper and possible sex addiction who lived in the area named Claude Moulton. And Claude lived less than a mile from the scene of the accident. After Fred turned over the knife to police, it's not entirely clear what became of the knife, and police never commented on it publicly. So, just to clear this up, it seems that Fred just gave it to the police, and they either lost it or they just refused to comment on it for some reason. I mean, it's confusing as hell to me, but what we do know is that nothing came of it.
That's a rather large piece of evidence, it seems like, to just kind of vanish.
Yeah, it's a large
ether.
piece of evidence to just sweep under the rug. Like, I want to know more about that.
Yeah.
Did they test the alleged blood on it, or I just don't I don't know what to make of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm surprised that's not a much larger part of the story. But we'll put a pin in that, as you say, and move on.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the A-frame cabin once owned by Claude Moulton. The following is an excerpt from an Oxygen.com article written by Gina Tron in 2017. A possible explosive breakthrough in the Maura Murray case has been made. On the most recent episode of The Disappearance of Maura Murray, former U.S. Marshal Art Roderick and journalist Maggie Freeling concluded that, in their opinion, Maura Murray was probably murdered. John Smith, a former police officer and private investigator who has helped the Murray family for over a decade, offered Roderick and Freeling his leads on potential suspects. Smith spoke out about two individuals who lived in the area. One of them lived in a house located about a mile away from the accident scene. Quote, "There were rumors out there that Maura was taken and brought to this home and was actually killed in the house," end quote, Smith said. Quote, "Could he have picked up Maura and then murdered her only a mile away from where she crashed," end quote, she asked. According to Fred Murray, one of the men told him he found a knife in the other individual's glove compartment with blood on it. He sent the knife to Fred, who in turn tried to give it to police. According to Smith, the police initially refused the potential piece of evidence. Police accepted it the second time. Smith doesn't know what happened from there. Police have said they can't share anything publicly. The owner of the house allowed Smith to go into the home in 2006. Quote, "So, when we went up with the cadaver dogs, and the dogs got a big hit off this upstairs closet from human remains, and carpet samples were given to the New Hampshire State Police," end quote. Police have not revealed what, if anything, has been done with those samples. There is no more carpet left in the house because the floors have since been refurbished. In 2016, Smith returned to the house along with Tim Polari, I think I said that right.
Yeah.
And Lance, this is the tough one, Lance
Reenstierna,
hosts of the Missing Maura Murray podcast. The three found what looked like human blood on wood panels inside a bedroom closet. Quote, "We actually took wood chips from that closet, and I have those in my possession," end quote, Smith said. He allowed Roderick and Freeling to get the chips examined by an expert on the most recent episode. Dr. Max Noureddine, a molecular geneticist, tested the wood chips using
Nailed it.
Yes, nailed it. I warned you earlier, there are going to be a lot of names and words I was going to jack up here.
Nailed it.
He said the samples should turn pink if there is blood on them. With Freeling and Roderick present, Noureddine conducted the test. Quote, "I do see some pink colors showing up," end quote, he said. Now, the wood chips are off to be tested for DNA. Could this be a major development in the case that could possibly explain once and for all what happened to Maura? End of expert.
End of expert.
End of expert. Definitely this expert.
Yeah. So just to provide an update on the results of that testing, nothing definitive ever came from it. So I think the samples were too degraded or something like that.
Yeah. Another possibly bombshell piece of evidence that just leads to a dead end or peters out and disappears.
Yeah. So anyway, before we conclude here, I'm sorry to throw facts into the story kind of out of order, but I didn't know how to feasibly include this into the main story because of how weird and seemingly outlandish it is and how convoluted it would have made the story and how side questy it kind of seems. But I want to talk about this voicemail that Billy Rausch, Maura's boyfriend, got while he was in the airport just about to board his flight. So he turned off his phone, and while his phone was off, he gets this weird voicemail. So I want to read this quick excerpt from the WhitmanHansonExpress.com. Quote, "While a search was beginning in Woodsville, New Hampshire, Billy Rausch was walking through security in a Dallas airport. He had just shut off his phone when he received a voice message. Sharon Rausch, Billy's mother, described the message. Quote, "It was very short. consisted of a shivering, soft whimpering sound with labored breathing as if someone was very cold, end quote. The number traced back to an AT&T calling card. Coincidentally, Sharon said she had bought 2 AT&T calling cards for Maura the previous Thanksgiving holiday. After an investigation, New Hampshire State Police traced the calling card to the American Red Cross. Sharon had called the Red Cross sometime between Tuesday night and early Wednesday morning to request an emergency leave for Billy, but she doubts the mysterious call could have come from the Red Cross. Quote, I will say with a certainty that contrary to New Hampshire State Police info, the call could not be traced, end quote, Sharon later told a reporter for the series. Private investigators and local law enforcement in Ohio later tried to track the call, but without the card number and PIN, it was not traceable, Sharon said. Quote, it just doesn't make any sense that the call was from the Red Cross, because if they had been trying to call Billy, they never called back, end quote. The soft crying, sniffling, and muffled sobs didn't seem to make sense coming from the Red Cross, she said. Billy had been having problems with his phone where callers were sometimes sent to voicemail without realizing it, which could explain why a message was left and no one spoke, Sharon said. After police determined the call was from the Red Cross, officials said they considered the case closed on the phone call. End of excerpt. Wow, okay, so that is some weird shit, and it makes the story way more confusing than it needs to be. And, you know, it sort of pisses me off that there's no more elaboration on it. It just seems like something that might be huge, but again, it just got swept under the rug, right? I mean,
Yeah.
maybe it was nothing, but come on, just like explain that shit better.
Yeah, like, you know, yeah, maybe Maura got a call to Billy, you know, when this was all going down, you know, but they're just like, oh, it came from the Red Cross. Oh, hey, that doesn't make sense. Okay, case closed.
Yeah, you know, in this particular instance, man, I don't know if I trust the authorities. I think something about that doesn't seem right to me.
So they were able to determine the call came from an AT&T calling card, right? So back before we had smartphones, some of us had a flip phone and you had to go to the grocery store and you had to buy minutes, right? I think that's what they're getting after when they say calling card. Like, I think those minutes were from a bought, prepaid, loaded onto a phone. I don't know. That's just my guess, right? Why would the Red Cross buy minutes from a grocery store? You think they would have their own, you know, AT&T plan,
or even from just a landline. You know, like
right?
it just seems like someone in a Red Cross office isn't going to pull out a cell phone, especially back in those days. They're probably still using landlines. It just, something really weird about this. I don't know if I trust that it was from the Red Cross. I don't know how they came to that conclusion. And then also, it's like if they were trying to contact Billy, it just seems like they would try to call him back if they were trying to get in touch. So
yeah. No, it's very odd. You throw in the whole Red Cross thing, and it makes it seem so complicated that it's almost not even worth touching upon.
Yeah, and
right?
then it's like, who at the Red Cross tried to call him? So they determined that it came from the Red Cross. Did they identify the exact individual that tried to call him on that day?
Yeah, did the police call the Red Cross to try to close this loose end?
Yeah, I don't know. I couldn't figure it out. Well, so whatever happened to Maura Murray? The case of her disappearance is one of the most popular missing persons cases on the internet, with thousands of people completely obsessed. What happened to her on the night of February 9th, 2004? Some of the most common theories are, but not limited to: 1, she was abducted; 2, she accepted a ride from a bad person, which I guess is kind of the same; 3, she committed suicide; 4, she ran off to start a new life; and 5, she went into the woods, got lost, and succumbed to the elements. So, Kyle, what do you think happened to Maura, man?
So, I believe after, reviewing this for, I don't know, the last couple of days, which is nothing compared to her family that have been after answers for 20 years, I believe that she had a stress-induced nervous breakdown at school/work, right? Causes, full amount of causes unknown. I do like your theory of her dad flipping out about wrecking the brand new car. That is definitely got to be part of the equation, right? But the other things, long distance relationship that's not going good, you know, the stress of being in school, I don't know. But it sounds like she just has had enough. The stress is too much. She's got to get away. So she makes a plan. She comes up with this outlandish thing that, hey, there's been a death in the family, right? So I need to drop everything and I got to bail for a few days at least. You know, she goes to her ATM. She pulls out a ton of cash. She gets some booze and she heads wherever, you know, just gotta get away, gotta go party it out of my system. You know, she's in college after all, you know, just gotta go party it out. You know, so she's allegedly drinking and driving on the way. She washes out on a snow-covered road. She's afraid of getting busted for DUI. You know, this literally just happened with her dad's car. So the first few people to offer to help, she's like, no, thank you. I'll figure this out on my own. And then she realizes she can't figure this out on her own. You know, she doesn't know what's going on. And then the next person that comes by to offer help, she agrees. And I think this might have been Claude Moulton that was brought up. A dude with a violent history. A dude whose own brother said he probably killed Maura. It was found a bloody knife in the glove box. His house, years later, found blood on some wood in a closet. Cadaver dogs getting hits inside the house. I think that is what happened. Is she denied the first couple of people help and then realized that she was up shit creek and then agreed to the next person who came along, who happened to be Claude Moulton, who was a bad person.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty solid theory, man. I mean, I see so many parallels between her and myself kind of at that age. Like, I was a failed military cadet too, running enthusiast. Just like fucked up life at that time of my life. You know, I even drove the same car as her, just although a few years later. Yeah, you remember. Yeah, just
I remember.
Low level alcoholic, you know, never got a DUI though, thank God. I was working at Sears. I was living in some old people's basement. I was barely making it through community college, and yeah, I basically blew up on the launch pad too, and I'd be lying if I said that I never had daydreams about just running full speed and diving headfirst into a wood chipper. But you know, now I'm older. I'm in shape. My life is pretty good. I'm a pillar of the community, and I live a pretty I live a pretty kick-ass life too.
That's good. It's good to hear.
Yeah, I think that Maura could have too if she just managed to get back on the path, you know. But
yeah,
I think that what happened was, yes, I do think that she was under a lot of stress and she decided that she needed to get the fuck away for a few days just to clear her head. Maybe, you know, have a few drinks and all by herself somewhere, some resort town up north. I don't know, something like that. And then on her way, yeah, she's partying a little too early, you know, before she even gets there. She's sipping on wine through a Coke bottle, which I never did. I was never that bold. So, yeah, so she wipes out and she knows she's over the legal limit. So she refuses help from everybody, right? Because to accept help from anybody, especially the police, she's going to jail for DUI. And that's just, also you got to remember that she had to stay out of trouble until after February 2004. And so This would have been before her court date, right? So this would have not only given her the DUI, but she would have then faced charges for that other stuff too, the credit card fraud and the what was the other credit card fraud and what else?
Possible identity theft.
Exactly. So yeah, that would have fucked her life up forever. So what does she do? I think she just fucking runs off, right? She runs away from the scene and Here's where my theory is a little different from yours. I think
Okay.
that she probably ran down kind of back the way that she came from a little bit and then
Yeah.
hightailed it into the woods as more, the police and authorities started showing up at her car. I think she went into the woods. I think she got lost, couldn't find her way out. And you got to remember that night, it wasn't super cold, but it was still below freezing. And
Yeah.
I think that she got lost in there. It's not like she has an iPhone. She doesn't have a flashlight on her phone. She doesn't have cell phone coverage in the area. So she's just lost in the pitch darkness in the middle of the woods, and I think that's what most likely happened to her. Although your theory about her getting picked up by some ne'er-do-well who offered to quote unquote help her, I think that's also a strong possibility. But the thing about that is, New Hampshire, especially rural New Hampshire, is known for being a very, very low crime area, especially low violent crime. But, if there is this one particular shady guy who lived about a mile away, I mean, it's possible that she ran into him that night, but man, that would have been a hell of a coincidence. Like, lightning would have had to have struck twice for her. Like, she would have had to have rolled snake eyes twice in a row for that to happen,
Yeah. Well, I get why you think that'd be such a low possibility, but it says this dude, Claude Moulton, lived less than a mile from where she crashed her car. It's not like he lived within the 50-mile radius of this tiny yet sprawling community,
Right, but even if he did live nearby, I mean, the odds of her being on the road when he's on the road too, and they meet and they start talking to each other. So it's like you'd have to roll snake eyes 2 or 3 times in a row for all of the stars to align for that horrible shit to happen,
Yeah.
And maybe it did happen. Maybe it did happen that way, but I think that Occam's razor here is that she probably saw the police start to show up, come down the road, and she's like, "Oh fuck, I'm gonna haul ass, get away right into the woods, and I'm gonna sit it out and wait to see what happens from here." Maybe she went a little too far. She got lost. Maybe she twisted her ankle or something. And
well, if she wasn't fully, dressed for that kind of temperature upon leaving the car and the temperature dipped to just below freezing, she could have died that night just due to temperature. She could have got hypothermia hanging out in the woods.
Yeah.
Plus alcohol thins your blood,
that would have contributed to it as well.
Yeah. The only part that I don't like about the woods theory is the dogs lost her scent. Like, I'd like to think that trained police dogs could have followed that scent off the road and into the woods. Plus, I read that they've scoured that area, police and helicopters and volunteers, and her remains have never been found. How far would she have really gone into thick woods? You wouldn't have to go that deep to not be seen by the cops that are just, a few blocks down.
Yeah. I mean, to me, there's a hole in each of these theories, but if I have to pick one, I mean, she might not have even ran into the woods in that direct vicinity. She might have went further down the road and then into the woods, But yeah, I mean, as for the police dogs, I wish I could hear from someone who knows more about how police dogs work and how common it is for police dogs to just randomly lose scent trails.
Yeah.
But yeah, you could be right, man. You could be right. Maybe she did get into the car of some bad person. Yeah. But it seems to me, putting myself in her shoes that night, like, for example, if I was drunk, I wrecked my car, and I know I couldn't afford to get a DUI, I probably would have ran into the woods to get away too and waited for the whole scene to blow over, And I do want to say that there is a person in my life, I'm not going to name them, that did that exact fucking thing when they were younger. They wrecked their car. It's not who you think. They wrecked their car one night. Actually, it was this person's friend that was driving, right? Driving his car. Wrecked the car. They got out, ran away. Police towed it. Didn't get the DUI. So stupid as fuck. I mean, it's stupid as fuck. Don't fucking do that. But
No.
I think that's what she tried to do. I think she went into the woods or wherever, got lost, and succumbed to the elements. That's my best guess. But a close number 2 for me would be your theory.
Cool. Glad you agree that closely, at least.
Yeah, I don't think that she committed suicide. At least, I don't think she went up there to do that because brought her college textbooks. Why would she do that?
Yeah.
Ran off to start a new life. Again, why would she bring her college textbooks if she was planning on starting a new life? So, I mean, there's really only 2 very strong theories in this case. One, she either like ran off into the woods, got lost, and succumbed to the elements, right? Or 2, she was abducted by a bad person. Let's put it that way.
My other number 2 is she's running down the road away from the scene. Maybe another drunk driver comes around the road and hits her. And then so they don't get in trouble. They pick up the body, they throw it in the vehicle, they take off, never to be seen again. But, there's no talk of debris. And, the neighbors heard and saw her car run off the road. So those are the holes in that theory.
I don't think that's the case. Well, do you have anything else you want to say about this one, man? Do you think that she got kidnapped?
Yeah, I gave you my theory, you gave me yours. We both agree that it's strange that the whole bloody knife thing and the DNA test on the carpet and the wood chips from the closet just never turned up anything. It's like there seem to be a lot of leads that were just kind of swept under the rug, which is very strange,
I agree, man. I agree. Let me see if I have anything else I want to ask you. Why do you think that she broke down in tears at the job? So just to remind you, this was before she wrecked the car.
Yeah, but this was day of.
Was it the day of? I thought it was like a day or 2 before.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like a day or 2 before.
Okay. Yeah. Same theory. I think she had a stress-induced nervous breakdown. I think there was just too many things going wrong in her life, or things she perceived to be going wrong in her life, and just stuff piling up, and it was just too much, and yeah, so sometimes you got to just cry to let it out,
You sound like a 90s man.
I sound like a 90s man? I don't cry to let it out. There's just other people I know who do that.
Anyway, do you have any apologies, shout outs, or clarifications to make before we go? Or do you have anything else?
Just a shout out to the Murray family. I in doing what little research I did into this, her family has not given up, right? They've
still
been at
out
this
there.
for 20 plus years. They have not given up. They have started podcasts and just everything else, and they are still after the answer. So shout out to the Maura family for
not
never
giving
up. Yeah.
I guess today I'd like to apologize to all of our listeners for being late on this episode. We were actually scheduled to record this episode last weekend, but Kyle decided that he had more important things to do, so
I had to get away from life and go party.
Yeah, don't blame me, blame Kyle. He had to get away and go party.
That's exactly what I was doing.
Yeah. All right, man, I think it's time to get out of here. Like sands through the hourglass, so too are the minutes of our podcast. But don't fret, dear listener. We'll be back again to breathe new life into an old mystery next time.
Remember, folks, the truth is out there, somewhere in the ether. And through our powers combined, we'll solve that sumbitch once and for all.
This is Super Mystery Bros.
And I haven't even been to Jack in the Box yet, but there's only like one I know of. It's right by my shop, and it has super shitty reviews. Like the general consensus is it's the worst Jack in the Box ever. Yeah. Oh, and then like some months ago, a kid that worked there, this fucking teenager that worked there, was he got off his shift and he was just like sitting in one of the booths waiting for someone to come pick him up, and someone rolled into the Jack in the Box and just fucking plugged him right where he sat.
What the fuck?
Yeah, I was getting off of work and I drove by it and the cops had the whole place roped off, and then I read about it on the news that night.
Holy shit. Was it just random, or was he targeted for some reason?
I'm sure he was targeted. If it was random, I'm sure other people would have been hit. But no, like someone strolled in and fucking got this dude at like point blank right where he sat, and then they left, I guess. Jesus. I don't know. So I'm not going to that fucking Jack in the Box. Actually, one of my coworkers, when I first started working here, we were talking fast food. You know, and he's like, I've never even had Jack in the Box. I was like, really? It's like, you should try it. And I didn't say you should try the one by the shop, but I guess he went to that one and he was like, that was the worst shit ever. I'm never having Jack in the Box again.